Call came in on a Tuesday evening, sometime around 6:40. I remember because I'd just turned the heat down on the stove. I was making a simple pasta, nothing special, and my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't. The man on the other end spoke first. His voice was casual, relaxed, like he was calling someone he knew well. "Hey, has Erica made it to the hotel yet?" I stood there holding the spatula, and for a second I thought I'd misheard him. I asked him to repeat himself. He did. Same words, same easy tone. I told him I wasn't sure who he was trying to reach. He went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where someone is confused, the kind where someone suddenly understands they've made a serious mistake. Then the line went dead. I set the spatula down, I turned off the burner, and I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, not moving. My name is Daniel. I'm 36 years old, and at the time this happened, I'd been living in Houston, Texas for about 9 years. I grew up in central Louisiana, moved to Houston after community college, and worked my way into a warehouse supervisor position at a mid-sized distribution company out near the port. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was stable. I managed a team of about 14 people, handled scheduling and safety compliance, and I was good at it. The kind of job where nobody really notices you when things are going right, which is most of the time. Erica and I had been married for 4 years. We met through mutual friends at a birthday party, dated for 2 years, got married at a small outdoor ceremony in Spring, Texas, her family's preference. We didn't have kids yet, though we'd talked about it. We owned a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet part of Katy, west of Houston. Good neighborhood, manageable mortgage, nothing flashy. By most measures, we had a normal life. Dinner together most nights, shared errands on Saturdays. She liked true crime podcasts and reality cooking shows. I was into college football and woodworking, though I hadn't touched my router table in months. We weren't the type of couple who posted everything online or made a show of things. We were just steady, or at least I thought we were. Before I go further, if you're watching this, I'd genuinely like to know where you're tuning in from. Drop it in the comments, especially if you're somewhere in the South or the Midwest. And if anything about this story sounds familiar to you, something you noticed, something you second-guessed yourself on, feel free to share it. I think a lot of people keep these things to themselves longer than they should. If this kind of story is something you want to hear more of, subscribing helps more than you'd think. Erica worked as a staff accountant for a small financial services company based in the Galleria area. About 30 employees total, from what she described. She'd been there for just under 3 years. The job paid decent, not remarkable, but solid, and she generally seemed to like it. She talked about her coworkers occasionally, complained about the commute when traffic was bad, mentioned her boss now and then. His name was Marcus. She'd brought him up enough times that I had a general picture. Mid-40s, ran a tight operation, expected a lot from his team. Tax season was always her most demanding stretch. January through April, she'd come home tired, sometimes skip dinner, go straight to the couch with her laptop. That part was nothing new. I'd seen it happen every year since we'd been together. I didn't think much of it. What started in late February of last year, though, was different in a way I didn't immediately name. It began with her coming home later than usual. Not dramatically late, not midnight or anything like that. More like 8, 8:30, sometimes closer to 9. She'd text me around 5:30 or 6 most evenings. Running behind, don't wait on dinner. I'd eat, save her a plate, and she'd come in through the garage door, looking genuinely tired. Hair slightly flat. Laptop bag on her shoulder. Sometimes she'd already eaten, she said. They'd ordered food in for the team. I believed her. That's the part that stays with me. I believed her, because nothing about it seemed off at the time. Tax season meant long hours. She'd always said that. And she never seemed evasive when she came home. She'd sit down, ask about my day, tell me something minor about hers. There were no obvious signs of anything. But something I've noticed about myself, looking back, is that I'm the kind of person who registers things without fully processing them right away. Details sit in the back of my mind, and I don't always know what to do with them until later. It's the same skill that makes me good at my job, noticing when something in a workflow is slightly off before it becomes a real problem. I just didn't apply it at home. The first thing I registered without thinking much about it? Her car. One evening in early March, she came home around 8:45. I hadn't eaten yet. We'd planned to eat together, and when I heard the garage door open, I went to the kitchen to start heating things up. When she came inside, she looked tired the way she usually did, but there was something slightly different about her. She seemed more composed, maybe, than I would have expected for someone who'd supposedly been buried in spreadsheets for 12 hours. She smelled like she'd freshened up recently. That's not something I could have put into words at the time. I just noticed it the way you notice a small thing that doesn't quite fit and then let it go. Her car, when I glanced out the side window toward the driveway, had no coffee cups on the console. Erica drank coffee on long work days, almost always. When she came home late, there was usually a Starbucks cup or a thermos, or at least a wrapper from something she'd picked up. That night, nothing. Car was clean. I didn't say anything. I told myself it didn't mean anything, because honestly, it didn't have to. Maybe she'd cleaned the car. Maybe she hadn't needed coffee that day. I plated the food and we ate together, and I let it go. A week or so later, she mentioned, casually, mid-conversation, that her company was sending a few people to a seminar in Dallas. A 2-day thing, she said. She wasn't sure if she'd be included, but Marcus had mentioned it as a possibility. I said something like, "That's fine, just let me know." She nodded. We moved on. I didn't think about it again for almost 2 weeks. Then one evening, a Thursday, mid-March, she texted me later than usual. It was nearly 7 before I heard from her, and the message was brief. Late meeting. Might be another hour. Don't wait up. Don't wait up. That was a new phrase. She'd never used it before, not exactly like that. I made dinner, ate alone, watched part of a game. She came home around 9:15. This time she did look tired. More than usual, actually. She said the meeting had run long and that Marcus had kept the whole accounting team to review Q1 projections. She seemed a little frustrated by it, which felt real. But when I went to say goodnight and she was already on her side of the bed with the lamp off, I found myself lying there in the dark, turning something over quietly in my head. Don't wait up. It was 2 words, that's all. But it was different from everything she'd said before, and I wasn't sure why it had stayed with me. I fell asleep without an answer. But the question didn't go anywhere. The Thursday night came and went, and by the weekend things felt normal again. We went to Home Depot Saturday morning, picked up some weather stripping for the back door, grabbed lunch at a place we liked off I-10. She laughed at something I said in the parking lot, genuinely laughed, the kind that's hard to fake. I remember thinking I'd been overthinking things. That's what makes this kind of situation so disorienting. It doesn't stay uncomfortable. It comes and goes. And every time things feel normal again, you use that as evidence against your own instincts. March moved into April. Tax season was supposedly at its peak, which meant the late evenings continued. 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes 4. Always with a text around 5:30 or 6. Always a reasonable explanation. Paperwork, client files, a review Marcus needed done before morning. The reasons varied just enough that none of them stood out individually. What started standing out was the frequency. I've worked long hours before. I know what sustained workplace pressure actually looks like on a person. The short temper, the low energy on weekends, the inability to fully decompress. Erica wasn't showing any of that. She was tired when she came home. Yes, but on weekends, she was fine. More than fine, actually. She seemed lighter than usual. Easier. Like someone who was getting something they needed, though I couldn't have told you what that meant at the time. I didn't say anything. I told myself I was reading into it because I was home alone too many evenings and had too much time to think. But then came the first thing I couldn't explain away. It was a Wednesday evening, first week of April. She'd texted at her usual time, staying late, don't hold dinner. And I'd eaten around 7 and settled in. Around 8:00, I realized I'd left my work tablet in the car, so I walked through the garage and out to the driveway to grab it. Her car wasn't there. That wasn't unusual on its own. She was still at work. I knew that. But what I noticed, and this sounds minor, I understand that, was that her parking spot was completely dry. We'd had rain that afternoon, a decent amount, maybe an inch, starting around 3 and tapering off by 5:30. My truck, which I'd driven home at 4:45, had a faint wet outline still drying beneath it. The concrete was visibly darker around the tires. Her spot was clean and dry, bone dry, which meant her car had not been in that spot at any point during the rain, which meant she had not come home between leaving work and wherever she was. I stood there for a moment, tablet in hand, looking at a dry patch of concrete, and felt something shift quietly in my chest. She hadn't mentioned going anywhere else. She never did. The routine was always work late, come home. There was no gym stop, no errands, no friends she visited on weeknights. That wasn't our pattern. I went back inside. I didn't call her. I put the tablet on the counter and turned the TV back on and told myself there was a reasonable explanation I wasn't thinking of. She came home at 9:40. Said it had been a brutal day. Said Marcus had been on edge about a client audit and had needed everything double-checked before it was submitted. She seemed genuinely drained. I asked, as casually as I could, whether she'd had to run out at all. Pick anything up, anything like that. She said no. Said she'd been at her desk all evening. I nodded. I didn't push it. I didn't tell her what I'd noticed. But I didn't forget it either. About a week after that, maybe 10 days, I got a piece of information that I didn't go looking for. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I wasn't going through it. I wasn't anywhere near it intentionally. I was walking past to get a glass of water, and the screen lit up with a preview notification. The name at the top read Marcus W. The message underneath, in that truncated preview format, said, "Next time let's try the one closer to." That was all I could see before the screen went dark. I stood there with my hand on the faucet. I want to be clear about what I did next, because I think it matters. I didn't unlock her phone. I didn't try to read the rest of the message. I stepped back, filled my glass, and went to the living room. I sat down on the couch and looked at the wall and thought about what I'd just read. Next time, let's try the one closer to. The one closer to what? That sentence didn't have a professional ending in my mind. It wasn't the one closer to the office. It wasn't the one closer to the client. Maybe it was. I couldn't know that, but the phrasing was relaxed in a way that felt out of place. Next time. Like there was an established pattern. Like they'd already done something once and were discussing the logistics of doing it again. I replayed the conversation I'd had with her weeks earlier when she'd mentioned the possible seminar in Dallas. She had never brought it up again after that. I hadn't asked. I didn't know whether she'd gone, whether it had been canceled, whether she'd been included or not. I realized I'd never followed up on it. And she'd never volunteered anything further. When she came out of the shower, I was still on the couch. She settled in next to me, hair damp, asked what I wanted to watch. I said I didn't care. She picked something. We sat there for an hour like everything was fine. I watched the show and said the right things at the right moments, and all the while I was doing quiet math in my head, tallying things that I'd individually dismissed, lining them up in order, trying to see whether they formed a shape. Late nights, 3 and 4 times a week. A car that hadn't been home during the rain. Don't wait up. A text from her boss that began with "next time." None of it was proof. I knew that. Each piece on its own had a reasonable explanation. But the accumulation of them, that was starting to feel like something else. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was upset exactly. More because some part of my brain had stopped accepting the simple explanations, and I didn't know what to do with that yet. I want to tell you about the kind of person I am when something is bothering me. I don't confront fast. I never have. It's not avoidance exactly. It's more that I need to be certain before I say something I can't take back. I've watched people blow up relationships over misunderstandings, over assumptions that turned out to be wrong, and I always told myself I wouldn't be that person. So I waited. I watched. And I kept track of things without letting on that I was. That habit, which had always served me well, was both useful and painful over the next 2 weeks. The first thing I did was start paying closer attention to her schedule without making it obvious. Not tracking her, nothing like that. Just being more present to the details I'd previously let slide past me. I noticed that the late nights had a pattern to them. They clustered around certain days, Tuesdays and Thursdays most consistently, occasionally a Monday, rarely Fridays. I started mentally logging it. 4 weeks back, I could already see it. Tuesday, Thursday. Tuesday, Thursday, one Monday in there, almost never a Friday. That regularity bothered me more than the late nights themselves. Genuine tax season crunch doesn't follow a clean weekly schedule. Deadlines and client demands don't organize themselves neatly into 2 specific evenings per week. But a standing arrangement, something planned in advance, that would look exactly like this. I didn't tell her what I was thinking. I kept the dinners going, kept the routine going, kept everything on the surface exactly as it had been. The second thing I noticed was about her phone. Erica had never been secretive about her phone before. Not in 4 years. She left it on the counter on the coffee table on her nightstand with the screen facing up. She took calls in the same room as me without lowering her voice. That had always felt like a natural sign of someone with nothing to hide, and I'd never thought about it as significant until it changed. Sometime in mid-April, her phone started going face down. Every surface, counter, table, nightstand, always face down. I noticed it first on a Sunday afternoon and thought nothing of it. Then I noticed it again Monday evening. Then the rest of the week. She also started taking it into the bathroom with her. Not just for showers, for everything. She'd walk to the kitchen, realize she'd left it in the living room, and double back to get it before continuing. I saw her do that twice in one evening. I didn't say anything. I just filed it. The third thing was a name. About 3 weeks after the phone notification I'd seen, she mentioned Marcus in conversation for the first time in a while. We were talking about nothing in particular, something about whether we wanted to do anything for Memorial Day weekend, and she brought him up offhand. Said he'd been talking about the whole team taking a long weekend if things settled down by then. I asked, as naturally as I could manage, what Marcus was like as a boss. Just general conversation. She said he was demanding but fair, organized, took work seriously. I asked if she liked working for him. She said yes, that he was good at his job and that she respected him. Then she changed the subject, quickly but not theatrically, just a natural pivot. She asked whether I wanted to drive to San Antonio or fly if we did a trip this summer. I answered her. We talked about San Antonio for a few minutes, but I had caught something in that brief exchange that I kept turning over afterward. She had answered my questions about Marcus the way you answer questions about someone you've rehearsed answers for. Not nervous, not defensive, just slightly too smooth. Too even. Like she'd already thought about what she would say if someone asked. Most people talking casually about their boss would include some small irritation. Some quirk. Some habit that gets on their nerves. Erica had given me 3 clean, positive sentences and then moved on. Then came the moment that removed most of my remaining doubt. It was a Thursday evening. She'd texted at her usual time, running behind, and I was home alone. At some point, I walked through the bedroom to change out of my work clothes and noticed her laptop was open on the bed, which was unusual. She didn't typically leave it open. I wasn't going to touch it. I walked past it, but the screen was still on. It hadn't gone to sleep yet, and as I passed, something caught my eye. An email window. I didn't stop and read it, but in the second I was adjacent to it, I saw enough. A thread. Her name at the top, Marcus's name below hers, and a subject line that read, "Bree, this weekend." I kept walking, changed my clothes, came back out to the kitchen. This weekend. That was a reply in an ongoing thread. That meant there was a previous email. That meant there had been planning. And it was a Thursday, the same evening she was supposedly working late. I thought about the hotel. The man on the phone who'd called me by mistake months earlier, though I'm getting slightly ahead of myself with the timeline. What I can tell you is that by this point, the picture was nearly complete in my head. I hadn't confirmed everything, but I had stopped genuinely doubting what was happening. There's a specific feeling that comes when you've been holding on to the possibility that you're wrong, and you finally let go of it. It's not explosive. It's quiet and heavy, like something settling into place that you didn't want to settle. I sat at the kitchen table that night and felt exactly that. She came home at 9:20. She seemed fine, normal, kissed me on the cheek when she came in, asked if I was tired, said she was going to shower and go to bed. I told her good night. I sat at that table for another 40 minutes after she went upstairs. I had a decision to make, not about what was happening, I was past that, but about what I was going to do with what I knew. Whether I was going to keep watching, whether I was going to confront her directly, whether I was going to say something that night or give it more time. I decided to give it one more event, one more concrete thing, because as certain as I felt, I still wanted something I hadn't assembled myself from fragments. I wanted something undeniable. I didn't have to wait long. The phone call came 4 days later. Tuesday evening. I was at the stove, pasta on low heat, maybe 6:45. My phone buzzed on the counter, unknown number, and I picked up. The man's voice was relaxed, familiar in tone, the way people sound when they're certain of who they're calling. "Hey, has Erica made it to the hotel yet?" I didn't answer immediately. I asked who was calling. The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down on the counter, turned off the burner, and stood in my kitchen understanding, completely and without any remaining question, what had been happening for the past several months. I didn't call her. I didn't call the number back. I sat down at the kitchen table and stayed there for a long time, doing nothing in particular, just letting it land. She came home around 10:15 that night. No text beforehand, which was unusual. She came in through the garage looking composed, not disheveled, not guilty-faced, just normal. Said the evening had run long, said she was exhausted. I told her I'd gotten a phone call earlier. She set her bag down and looked at me. From who? I said I didn't know. That a man had called asking if she'd made it to the hotel yet. The pause she took was very brief, maybe 2 seconds. But it was the wrong kind of pause. Not confused, not surprised. Processing. She said it was probably a wrong number. I looked at her and said, "He asked for you by name, Erica?" She didn't answer that. What followed wasn't a screaming match. It wasn't dramatic in the way people might imagine. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then she started talking, slowly, in the careful way people speak when they're deciding in real time how much to admit. She told me it had been going on for about 4 months. That it had started during a work trip in February, a real work trip, she said, as if that distinction mattered. That it wasn't something she had planned. That Marcus wasn't in a relationship. That she hadn't known how to stop it once it started. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her one question. I asked her if she still wanted to be married to me. She didn't answer right away, and that pause told me more than anything she'd said in the previous 10 minutes. She said she was sorry, said it several times, said she hadn't meant for any of it to happen, that she knew how that sounded, that she didn't have a good explanation. I told her she didn't need to keep talking. I slept in the guest room that night, not out of anger, exactly, more because I needed to be somewhere quiet, away from the version of things I'd believed in until a few hours ago. I lay there in the dark and thought about the dry concrete under her parking spot, the phone going face down on every surface. "Don't wait up." A subject line that read, "This weekend." A stranger's voice asking if she'd arrived safely. All of it had been there. I had seen most of it. I had just needed time to trust what I was seeing. In the weeks that followed, we tried 2 sessions with a couples counselor. I went because I wanted to be fair, to give the situation a real look before making any permanent decisions. But I knew by the second session that I was going through the motions. Something had shifted in me during those weeks of quiet observation, something that couldn't shift back. Trust, once it goes that way, doesn't return on a schedule. And I wasn't willing to spend years waiting to see if it would. We separated in late May. The process was civil, which I was grateful for. No major disputes, no drawn-out legal battles. We sold the house in Katy, split things reasonably, and went our separate directions. She stayed in the Houston area. I transferred to a facility my company operated closer to Beaumont and started over in a quieter way. I'm not going to tell you I handled all of it perfectly. There were weeks that were harder than they looked from the outside. but I also never felt like I'd made the wrong decision. That steadiness, as uncomfortable as everything else was, kept me moving forward. I've thought a lot about what I would tell someone in the early stages of what I went through. That period where you're noticing things but haven't named them yet. I think the most honest thing I can say is this. Trust the accumulation. Any one detail can be explained away. But when you find yourself explaining away the fifth and sixth thing, something in you already knows. The question is just whether you're ready to listen to it. I eventually was. It just took a stranger's phone call to make it undeniable. If you've stayed with this story through all 4 parts, I appreciate that more than I can say. If any part of it resonated with you, something you noticed, something you second-guessed, something you're still sitting with, the comments are open, I read them. If you haven't subscribed yet, and this kind of honest, grounded storytelling is something you want more of, I'd be glad to have you here. No pressure, just real stories, told as plainly as I know how.